"Why are you crying?" the older boy whispered, his small hand trembling as he actually stood on his own 2 feet. Ethan Caldwell, a polished businessman used to controlling every detail, froze in the doorway of his living room. For years, doctors had told him his sons, Liam and Noah, had a degenerative muscle disease. Wheelchairs? Decline. Prepare yourself. Yet here they were, breathing hard cheeks, flushed with effort, playing doctor, and wobbling like newborn fawns, while the new housekeeper, Monique, crouched beside them with bright yellow rubber gloves pulled up to her elbows like superhero sleeves. "No running," Monique said, but her voice was warm, not scared. She steadied Noah with 2 fingers at his ribs, barely touching him. The boys giggled, proud and breathless, as if their bodies had been waiting for permission. Ethan's throat tightened. "What did you do to them?" he snapped, because fear always sounded like anger in his mouth. Monique didn't flinch. She glanced toward the hallway where the nurse, Ms. Kendra, usually appeared with her tray of injections. "I didn't do anything," Monique said quietly. "But somebody has." Ethan stared at his sons, then at the faint needle mark on Liam's arm, the way Noah's eyes sometimes went glassy after treatment. The room seemed to tilt. In the boys' laughter, he heard a terrible possibility. They weren't getting worse. They'd been kept weak. Monique rose slowly, meeting his gaze. "If you want the truth," she said, "stop listening to what you've been told and start watching what's been happening." Ethan didn't answer her right away. He just stood there, palm pressed to the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The boys were still laughing, still catching their breath alive in a way the house hadn't felt in years. He'd hired Monique to be quiet, invisible. Someone who came in, scrubbed, and disappeared before the real staff arrived. He'd even said it out loud on her first day, voice flat eyes on his phone, "Don't distract the kids. Just clean." But Monique had a way of being present without taking over. She didn't hover. She didn't baby them. She just made space. Now she sat cross-legged on the rug, the yellow gloves squeaking softly as she flexed her fingers. "Dr. Banana Hands is in the building," she announced, wiggling her gloved fingers like a puppet. Liam's face lit up, and Noah let out a wheezy giggle that turned into a cough, then a grin when Monique leaned in and whispered, "Deep breath, young man. In through the nose, out like you're cooling soup." Ethan watched the smallest things, the way Noah's shoulders dropped when she spoke, the way Liam's eyes stayed on her hands like they were a lifeline. In this house, everything had been whispered. Bad news, worse news, be careful, don't fall, don't try. Monique didn't whisper. She didn't scold the boys for wanting to move. She didn't look at their legs like they were ticking time bombs. "You're okay," she told them, not as a promise but as a steady fact in the room. Liam shuffled forward a few inches, bare feet sliding on the rug. His knees shook. Ethan's heart lurched, ready to rush in, ready to stop it before it broke. But Monique only held out 2 fingers, barely touching Liam's elbow like a feather against a doorbell. "Easy," she said. "You're driving the car. I'm just the seatbelt." Ethan swallowed hard. For the first time it hit him. Monique wasn't performing a miracle. She was doing something simpler, treating his sons like they belonged to their own bodies again. The laughter didn't last. Down the hall, a cartwheel squeaked, slow, deliberate, like a warning you could hear before you saw it. Miss Kendra appeared in the doorway in crisp scrubs, a silver tray balanced in her hands. 2 syringes lay on top, each one filled with a honey-colored liquid that caught the light like warm tea. "Time," she said, not looking at the boys, first looking at Ethan. "If we miss the window, their symptoms will worsen." Liam's smile collapsed. Noah's fingers curled into the carpet. Their bodies didn't lean toward the tray. They leaned away from it. Ethan felt his own spine stiffen like he'd been trained the same way. "They need it," he said more to himself than anyone, because he couldn't afford doubt. Doubt would mean he'd failed them. Monique rose from the rug, slow and steady. The yellow gloves squealed as she peeled one finger free and pointed, not accusing, just certain. Funny, she said, her voice calm, but sharp enough to cut glass. Because when they move, they look like kids. When that stuff hits them, they look like someone dimmed the lights behind their eyes. Miss Kendra's jaw tightened. You're a cleaner. Stay in your lane. Monique didn't blink. My lane is right here, she said, stepping between the tray and the boys without making a show of it. And don't tell me play makes them worse. I've watched them for days. Their legs shake from effort, not sickness. The slump comes after this. Ethan's chest tightened. He stared at the syringes, at the way the liquid clung thickly to the barrel. He pictured Noah after treatment, head lolling drool at the corner of his mouth, words turning to mush. He'd called it fatigue. He'd called it normal. Ms. Kendra's eyes flicked to the boys, then back to Ethan, hard and practiced. Do you want them in pain again? She asked. Do you want them unable to breathe? Monique's voice softened, but it didn't back down. Fear is a leash, she said, and somebody's been holding it tight. Ethan opened his mouth to defend the only routine that had kept him from falling apart. Then Liam whispered, barely audible, Please. Not yet. And Ethan realized the house wasn't quiet because it was peaceful. It was quiet because his sons had learned to be afraid. Ethan didn't know what to do with the silence that followed. Ms. Kendra stood there. Trey's steady expression sealed tight like she'd done this 1,000 times and expected him to fold on command. The boy's eyes stayed locked on Ethan's face, searching for the decision before it landed. Monique shifted her weight and let her gaze drop not to the syringes, but to Ms. Kendra's purse hanging from the back of a chair. It looked ordinary. Too ordinary. When Ms. Kendra leaned down to adjust the tray, Monique moved like a shadow, quiet, fast-practiced. Her gloved hand brushed the edge of the cart, and something small clicked against plastic. Ethan saw it, a tiny glass vial, empty now, rolling toward the baseboard. Monique didn't snatch it like a thief. She simply stepped, blocking it from view, and crouched as if she were picking up a toy. Her yellow glove closed around the vial with a soft squeak. Ethan's pulse thudded in his ears. Monique, he started, warning and question tangled together. Monique stood and walked straight to him. Up close, he could see her breathing slow and controlled, while her eyes stayed fierce, steady. She didn't hold the vial up like a trophy. She slipped it into Ethan's palm instead, warm from her glove. Don't say anything, she murmured so low only he could hear. Just listen. Ms. Kendra's voice snapped through the room. We're done with this. Hand me the boys. Monique didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She only leaned in closer to Ethan like she was giving him directions in a storm. Your cameras, she whispered. Kitchen. 2 o'clock. Watch what she does before she comes in here. Watch what she carries in that bag. Ethan stared at the vial in his hand, clear glass sharp edges, the faintest amber stain clinging inside like a fingerprint. His mouth went dry. Why would she keep medicine in her purse? Monique added, her voice steady but tight, as if she was holding back something that might shatter them both. A real nurse doesn't hide what she's giving your kids. Across the room, Liam's small voice cracked. Dad, please. Ethan felt the vial bite into his skin as his fingers closed around it. And for the first time in years, he didn't reach for routine. He reached for the truth. Ethan waited until Ms. Kendra turned her back just long enough to shepherd the boys toward the couch with a practiced sweetness that suddenly made his stomach churn. The moment she left the room, he didn't speak. He didn't breathe right. He walked fast, too fast down the hall, past framed family photos that felt like strangers now, and into the kitchen, where the security monitor glowed on the counter. Monique followed quiet as felt. She didn't crowd him. She just stood beside him like a guardrail. Ethan's finger hovered over the playback. His hand shook so hard he had to brace his wrist against the granite. On screen, the timestamp blinked 2:00 p.m. There she was, Ms. Kendra, alone in the kitchen, not opening the medication cabinet, not checking labels. She set the tray down, glanced over her shoulder, then reached into her purse and pulled out a plain plastic bottle. No label, nothing but a cloudy cap. Ethan's throat tightened so sharply it hurt. On the screen, she twisted the cap and poured a careful stream into a cup, then squeezed in orange juice like she was hiding the taste. No. Ethan breathed, and the word came out broken. Monique's jaw clenched. Now you see it? She whispered. Not triumph, just grief. On screen, Ms. Kendra slid the bottle back into her bag like it was a secret she'd practiced 100 times. She wiped the rim of the cup with her thumb. Then she picked up the syringes, still empty, and filled them from that mixture, steady hands, no hesitation. Ethan felt the room tilt. Every treatment he'd signed off on. Every time he'd held his sons down with soft words and shaking hands. The memory of Liam's glassy stare after injections hit him like a slap. He turned to Monique, eyes wet, voice raw. I trusted her. Monique didn't look away. You trusted the title, she said gently, not the truth. Ethan stared back at the screen, at that unlabeled bottle, disappearing into a purse. His fingers closed around the tiny vial in his pocket like a piece of sharp, undeniable ice. And somewhere down the hall he heard Noah cough, small, tired, and it sounded like a countdown. Ethan didn't run back to the living room. He marched the way a man does when he's terrified of what he'll find, but more terrified of doing nothing. The hallway felt longer than it ever had, like the house was stretching to keep him away from his sons. Behind him, the kitchen monitor still glowed with that 2 o'clock betrayal. In his pocket, the tiny vial pressed into his thigh with every step a hard little reminder you weren't imagining it. You were being played. Monique stayed close, not tugging his sleeve, not whispering warnings, just there, steady as a metronome. When Ethan reached the doorway, the living room hit him like cold air. Liam sat slumped on the couch, his head tipped to one side, as if his neck had forgotten its job. His eyelids fluttered heavy and unfocused, and a thin line of drool shimmered at the corner of his mouth. Noah's gaze drifted past Ethan instead of landing on him like the boy was looking through fog. The bright life from minutes ago, the wobble, the giggle, the pride was gone. Ethan's breath stuttered. Liam, he said softly. The way you speak to someone you're afraid you might lose. Liam didn't answer. His mouth opened a fraction, but the sound never made it out. Across the room, Ms. Kendra stood with her back half-turned. She was too calm, too tidy. The tray was already being cleared like she was wiping away evidence of an ordinary routine. Ethan saw it then, her hand moving smooth and practiced, slipping an empty syringe into a small case. No label, no record, just disappearance. Ethan's voice rose before he could stop it. What did you just give them? Ms. Kendra didn't jump. She smiled the way people smile when they think the conversation is already won. Medication, Mr. Caldwell. Prescribed. Necessary. She clicked the case shut. They'll rest now. That's good for their condition. Monique stepped forward, yellow gloves still on the bright color, almost violent against the room's gray hush. That's not rest, she said, and her voice was quiet, but it carried. That's shut down. Ms. Kendra's eyes narrowed. You're overstepping. Ethan moved closer to his sons. He crouched, bringing his face level with Noah's. Noah's pupils looked too wide, his skin a shade paler than it should have been. Ethan touched his cheek, cool, damp, helpless. The anger that had lived in Ethan's chest for years finally found its target, and it wasn't the disease. He stood up slowly, the way you stand when something inside you has cracked and hardened at the same time. You said this would save them, he said, his voice shaking now, not with doubt, with fury. He glanced at Monique, and she didn't nod. She didn't have to. The truth was already in the room, slumped on the couch in two small bodies. Ethan faced Ms. Kendra, eyes wet and unblinking. Step away from my children, he said. Right now. The air didn't even have time to settle after Ethan's command before the doorbell exploded through the house. 3 sharp rings, urgent like someone had practiced them. Then a fist hit the front door. Once, Twice. Mrs. Kendra's eyes flicked toward the entryway, and for the first time, her calm looked rehearsed. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, voice smoothing itself into authority. "This is exactly why I documented everything. You're emotionally unstable. You're refusing care." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "You called someone." Monique's head turned slightly, like she'd heard the truth underneath the words before Ethan could. She moved first, yellow gloves still on, walking to the front door, with a steadiness that made the whole room feel less like it was spinning. When Ethan reached the foyer, the knocking came again. "Mr. Caldwell, we need you to open the door. We have paperwork." Monique didn't open it. She stood inches from the deadbolt shoulders, squared, chin lifted. "Who are you?" she called through the wood voice, calm but firm. But a family services officer and court-appointed transport a man answered. "We have an order to ensure the children receive medical treatment. Open the door." Ethan's mouth went dry. Transport. The word sounded like a cold hallway, fluorescent lights, strangers' hands. He looked back, Liam limp on the couch. Noah drifting his sons caught between sleep and something darker. Ms. Kendra stepped into the foyer, her tone suddenly sweet. "It's for the best," she said almost kindly. "They'll be safe. Proper supervision." Monique didn't even look at her. "Safe," she echoed, and the word came out like a blade. Then she turned to Ethan, eyes locked on his. "Don't let fear make your choice again." The deadbolt clicked, Ethan's hand did it, but Monique's presence held the moment together. He opened the door just a crack. Two people stood on the porch. A man in a suit holding a clipboard. A woman with a badge and a neutral face that didn't belong to family. The woman's eyes slid past Ethan, scanning the house like it was already a case file. "Mr. Caldwell," she began. "We're here due to a report." A report from her, Ethan snapped, jerking his chin toward Ms. Kendra. Monique lifted one gloved hand, palm out. Not aggressive, just a stop sign. "Before anyone touches those kids," she said, "look at them. Really look." The officials hesitated, eyes flicking toward the living room. And that's when the impossible happened again. From the couch, Liam's fingers clenched in the cushion. His face tightened with effort. Noah blinked hard, like he was fighting through thick water. Monique's voice cut through the fog, gentle but sharp. "Liam. Noah. Eyes on me. Breathe like we practiced." Ethan watched, heart hammering, as Liam's foot slid to the floor. Then Noah's. Knees trembling, shoulders shaking. They pushed, slow, shaky, stubborn, until they were standing. The woman with the badge froze. The man's pen stopped mid-air. Miss Kendra's smile cracked. Ethan's throat filled with a sound he didn't recognize, half sob, half laugh, because in that one trembling moment, his sons weren't evidence of an illness. They were evidence of the truth. For a second, nobody moved, like the whole house was holding its breath. The woman with the badge stepped inside, slowly, eyes fixed on Liam and Noah as they swayed on trembling legs. "You said they couldn't stand," she murmured, not to Ethan, almost to herself. Her voice lost that rehearsed neutrality. "Ma'am," she added, turning toward Ms. Kendra, "your report states the children are non-ambulatory." Ms. Kendra recovered fast. "Adrenaline," she said too quickly. "They're confused. This is dangerous." Monique's yellow-gloved hand lifted, palm open. "Dangerous is what's been in those syringes," she said. Then she looked at Ethan. "Show them." Ethan's fingers dug into his pocket. He pulled out the tiny glass vial Monique had slipped into his palm earlier and set it on the entryway table like it weighed 100 pounds. "This rolled out from her cart," he said, voice rough. "And the camera kitchen, 2 o'clock. She's mixing something from an unlabeled bottle in her purse." The man with the clipboard stared at the vial like it had teeth. The badge officer's eyes sharpened. "Do you have the footage?" Ethan nodded once. He didn't trust his voice. He only led them back to the kitchen monitor. When the video played, the room changed. No one talked over it. You could hear the faint, tinny sound of Ms. Kendra twisting a cap, pouring, stirring, hiding. The officer's jaw set harder with every second. When it ended, she exhaled through her nose, slow and controlled, like she was keeping herself from exploding. She raised her radio. "I need law enforcement and a medical investigator at this address. Now. Possible child poisoning. Preserve the scene." Ms. Kendra stepped back, smile gone. "You're making a mistake," she said, but her voice had lost its authority. It was all edges now. Less than an hour later, red and blue lights washed across Ethan's curtains. The sound of boots on his porch felt unreal, like a movie he never wanted to star in. 2 federal agents entered quiet, efficient, followed by a gray-haired physician with kind eyes and a hard, no-nonsense mouth. "I'm Dr. Raymond Keller," the doctor said, holding out his ID. "Toxicology. We're going to run some tests." Ethan watched Dr. Keller kneel in front of Liam and Noah, speaking gently, explaining every step like the boys mattered more than the paperwork. A swab. A small blood draw. A steady hand on a small shoulder. Noah flinched, and Monique leaned in. "Breathe with me," she whispered. "In. Out." Ms. Kendra tried to slip toward the hallway. One of the agents blocked her path without drama. "Ma'am," he said, "please don't move." Dr. Keller straightened eyes grave. "Mr. Caldwell," he said quietly, "this isn't a medical treatment. This looks like repeated exposure to a sedative, possibly combined with another agent. Systematic, not accidental." Ethan's knees threatened to give out. Why, he rasped. One agent opened a folder, flipping to a photo. "We believe this ties to Victor Langley," she said. "Fraud. Financial motive. He's been moving money through shells and medical channels, and we just picked him up." Ethan stared at the photo until his vision blurred. Behind him, Liam's hand found Noah's small fingers, gripping tight, still standing, still fighting. And Ethan finally understood the cruelest part his boys hadn't been fading. They'd been silenced. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat on the living room floor with the lights low, listening to the soft whir of the air vent and the slower, steadier rhythm of 2 little boys breathing without being forced into fog. Near dawn, Liam shuffled out in sock feet, eyes puffy but clear. Noah followed, rubbing his face like he couldn't believe he was awake on his own terms. They both stopped when they saw Monique still there, sitting cross-legged with a pair of bright yellow rubber gloves in her lap like they were something sacred. Monique slid the gloves on, slowly making a quiet squeak, then lifted her hands. "Dr. Banana Hands is on call," she said. Her voice was tired, but it smiled anyway. Liam's mouth twitched. Noah let out a small, broken laugh, half relief, half disbelief. Ethan reached for the gloves, too. His fingers hesitated. Then he pulled on the second pair Monique had brought from the kitchen sink. The latex snapped lightly at his wrists. It felt ridiculous. It also felt like a promise. "I owe you." Everything he tried to say, but his throat wouldn't cooperate. Monique shook her head, gentle and firm. "You don't owe me," she said. "You owe them your eyes, your time, your gut. Don't hand that over to anyone again." Liam stepped forward, slow, careful, then leaned into Ethan's leg the way a child does when they're finally sure the ground won't disappear. Ethan's gloved hand rested on his son's shoulder, steady and warm. "I'm here," Ethan whispered. "I'm not letting go." And in that quiet room, no agents, no sirens, no paperwork, Ethan finally became the kind of father his boys could breathe around. Sometimes the biggest danger isn't what's happening to the people we love. It's how easily fear can make us stop paying attention. Titles, uniforms, expert opinions. They matter, but they're not a substitute for your presence. If something feels off, don't swallow it to keep the peace. Ask, watch, verify, protect. If this story hit you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever ignored your instincts and later wished you hadn't? And if you want more emotional stories with real-life meaning, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one.